As a business person, there's a few things that you need to pay attention to when it comes to cloud services. And goes beyond, while some of these may seem like on the technical side, these are really on the business side. These are business determinations for you to determine whether a cloud service is going to be right for you. And the first one is it's self-manageable. The whole purpose of the cloud, to a certain extent, is so that you don't have to take care of it anymore. But you still want to be able to configure it the way you want to. Now, you don't want to take care of the actual box or the actual software or the actual systems that are running and what have you, but what you want to be able to do is make sure that you can manage it yourself so that you can add new services, new users, and what have you as you deem necessary. And so when you look at any cloud service, that's one of the top items that should be on your list. The second one, instantly available. When the cloud initially started and you set up an email address, it was ready like that. You were good to go. Yahoo or AOL or what have you would do all the DNS work on the back end to make sure that your email address was ready to go. Well, cloud services have now expanded beyond that, but the concept is the same. The moment you put in a new user, that new user should be ready to use that service. There should not be any kind of significant lag. If there is a significant lag and they tell you it's going to be 24 hours, that means it's being manually done on the back end, and that's not a type of service that you want to do. So in that regard, 15 minutes maybe, but if it's any more than maybe 3 to 4 minutes, we find that unacceptable to a certain extent. Scalable. Not everybody's going to stay small. Not everybody, unfortunately, as we've learned, is going to stay big. So you should be able to scale up and down on a whim. And again, these are things that you need to review with any cloud services provider. You need to ask them these questions. You can't be shy. You're about to put your system or your line of business in their hands. You got to make sure that they meet your requirements. Data access. This is the biggest one that people ask us. If you don't like your cloud services provider, how do I get out of it? Well, that's the whole thing. You want to be able to retain any ability to gain access to your data at any time, whether to take it off, whether just to review it, whether to move it to another or back it up to another provider. You should have unfettered access to that data. If there is any provision in the terms and conditions that says you don't go with that provider. And I do have to say this, as much as legalese and those terms and conditions seem to be a waste of time, these are the types of contracts you must read. Because at the end of the day, because it's your data, a contract may say it is not. And if you don't read the contract and you end up signing it, well, sorry, you signed it. It's not my fault you didn't read it. So you must read it, especially with a provision like that. And then the other thing is 24/7 support. So your cloud-based service is supposed to be anytime, anywhere access. I'm in China, I need to access my email. I'm in North Korea, I need to access my spy equipment and what have you on the cloud. You should be able to call the CIA help desk and what have you and get 24/7 support. You should be able to call the Microsoft help desk, get 24/7 support. I'm not denigrating Google in any way, shape, or form, but the way Google sets it up, Google does not provide you the direct support. If you do not buy from a reseller of Google, you actually only have community-based support, which is 24/7, but you're not talking to somebody who can actually work on the system. So there are differences. You have to know what your skill sets are. You need to know what your strengths are. These top 5 are not the only 5, but they are 5 that most business people are going to look at, understand, and be able to comprehend when they're reading it on a contract. That's the big key on cloud services. Yes, Dustin.
Well, I thought security was a big concern, especially in large organizations. How come they make it to the top 5?
Okay. The comment was on security. The reason why security here is not necessarily listed here, and I was hoping somebody would ask, is because it's actually this whole thing. All of these are related to the security of your system. The security of your system goes above and beyond username and password. It goes above and beyond whether your data may be encrypted, which for the most part it will not be, especially if you need real-time access to it, because there's not real-time encryption and translation available now. This is all based on you have, and that's why I put the data access on there. It's all based on the fact that you have ownership and unfettered rights to your data, which is really what you're storing up on a cloud system. Because you're not owning the system itself, all you have up there that's really yours is data. So that from that perspective, this is an all-encompassing. If I put security, I could have done a whole slide just on security. Part of the problem is that security gets into, excuse me, security gets into all of these. So instead of putting that slide and breaking it down, we just decided that we take these top 5 and we tell people, okay, when you go to cloud services, you can talk security until the end of the day. At the end of the day, though, these are the 5 items that we think that you're really going to want to focus on that are going to dictate then whether this is a secure application. Now, a lot of people tell me, I've given this slide previously, they say, why don't you put on there whether their engineers, whoever that cloud service provider, has access to my data. By the very nature of the cloud, they have access to your data. Hate to tell you that. They just will. We have almost 2,000 seats now on Microsoft's hosted platform. Every Microsoft engineer that works on that hosted platform would have access to all those clients' data. It is just the nature of the way it's structured. It's the same way as your IT guy has access to all your data when they're working on your system. The reason why I put it down there is there's nothing you can do about it. If they're going to work on the system, they need to have access to it. If they have access to the system, they have access to your data. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. There's no provision in any contract we have ever seen that talks about the internal engineers. What they do have, though, are those non-disclosure agreements that they put in there, usually a single line item. We're not going to tell anybody about your stuff. You're not going to tell anybody about our stuff. Where it gets interesting, which is it's too bad we don't have lawyers here, is when it gets into if somebody's subpoenaed. So data backup companies, to a certain extent, will encrypt your data before it leaves your premises and hits their data center. Because it sits on their data center encrypted, if anybody subpoenas that data, all they can turn over is encrypted data, of which they don't have access to. However, when you're on a cloud-based service, like Gmail, like Microsoft and what have you, if that data is subpoenaed and they turn over the data directly. And it's available to them. So we've had a lot of conversations with lawyers about how that works and what have you. Nobody's really sure because it hasn't made it through the courts as of yet. Yes, Lee?
Sure. In that regard, has the current thinking with regards to third-party indemnity? You're using a service provider to store all of your confidential and fundamental company information. If that information goes missing, has that been discussed? Is there any current thinking on that?
So the question was indemnity for the third-party vendors should client information get stolen, get lost, or what have you. There's actually, I mean, let's take credit card processing for an example. There are new laws in the United States. They're not really new. They're a couple years old, called PCI compliance. And what that is that the retailers, let's just take them for example, retailers who process credit card transactions, whether they do it in stores or online, must secure those credit card numbers in a certain format, in a certain type of setup, so that they can't be accessed. What prompted this, if anybody remembers, about 5-6 years ago, TJ Maxx. TJ Maxx was one of the first to be hacked, and they lost, I believe, 2 million, if I'm correct, 2 million credit card numbers with users. So Congress came out with this PCI compliance. What they are, part of the problem is that just deals with that one piece of information. There's nothing, so far as I know, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I just play one up here right now. There's nothing so far that has gone through the court system as it relates to cloud services. So there is no precedent set except for that type of credit card information or sensitive information. There is a law in New York State. You cannot send an unencrypted email that features any kind of private information or personal information on a user, such as their social security number or their credit card number. If you do, you're breaking the law. You can't even send the last 4 digits of your Social Security number or a credit card number through an unencrypted email in New York State. It's against the law. Now, my accountant does it on a regular basis, but I don't turn them in. But it's like HIPAA. Do you know what HIPAA is? HIPAA is, what's HIPAA stand for?
Health
Information
Privacy
Protection Act. Yeah. So, Health Information Privacy Protection Act is what we think the acronym stands for. But basically, it's the government dictating to people who hold medical records how those medical records have to be secure. Electronic medical records. I mean, you walk into any doctor's office, you see the files behind the receptionists and what have you, easily available. You can reach over and pull one off the shelf. But if it's an electronic one, it's got to be fully secured. Not only on the server side, but physically secured as well. And
just to drill down a little bit further on my question.
Sure.
If I was interviewing an organization, a service provider, my question would be, what happens if you lose my information?
So the follow-up question is that if you were interviewing a service provider, what happens if they lose their information? As of right now, they'll hem and haw. They'll throw up their arms. They'll say it'll be very difficult. Microsoft will say, well, we spend however many tens of millions of dollars to protect your data. We don't anticipate it leaving. They will you will read the contract, however, they'll indemnify themselves against certain acts and what have you. The Microsoft contract is the one I know the best, and they do indemnify themselves. As of right now, there is no answer. You can go and you can try the legal roads and what have you. Nobody has tried that as of yet, so until the courts actually settle it, I can't tell you what will happen. The best thing that they'll do for you is that they may launch their own internal investigation to try to help you out, but eventually what they're going to say is that, well, we have a backup of the data, you still have the data as to who has it now and what they can do with it. They're going to shrug. And I'm just being honest with you, as I expect they'll react. I don't know what the legal ramifications will be, and I don't think anybody else does either. Until it goes through, that's the whole thing. This technology, I mean, they're trying to do, if you're looking at the Copyright Acts, that's SOPA that's going through Congress right now, which is to update the Copyright Acts, and the anti-piracy laws and what have you, that's actually really dangerous. Because some of the provisions in it would be that if you put up, I'm not a Facebook user, but I do live with one. So in that regard, Facebook sometimes has a day where you change the picture to a celebrity that people think you look like, or at least they did at some point. Well, technically, with the SOPA Act that's working through, if you put that celebrity's picture up on your Facebook page, you'd be breaking federal law. So that's how far it's going. Part of the problem with laws is it's made by people who are not conversant on technology, don't really know how it works and what have you. So they make the laws based on how much money they're going to get for their re-election campaign. As you can tell, the cynic in me is coming out in this certain sense. But there are, until the courts handle it, I can't give you an answer on this one. I can give you what we would tell a client. I mean, we would do our damnedest to make sure it doesn't, but I can't protect against 100% of things. And that's the unfortunate part about it. Any other questions on this topic? This is the slide that usually gets the most activity.